There's nothing here, there's nothing here. We've never actually seen anything like this, even going back into the Watergate era.
Oh, and Paul Manafort was just a bit player throughout this campaign. I mean, I've said this once, I'll say it again. This president and those around him seem to know more Russians than I do, and I know a lot of Russians, believe me. It baffles the mind that not only have so many meetings taken place, that this administration denies having taken place, denies having met with certain people, but this president has yet to say even one slightly critical thing about Vladimir Putin. And it doesn't help that his Secretary of State is now not going to be attending a NATO summit in place of going to a meeting in Florida, obviously with the president of China.
And Jeremy Bash, having worked for your share of powerful figures in politics, I want to read from you. Tonight in the New York Times, again, Maggie Haberman and Glenn Thrush are out with a pretty powerful piece of journalism about the Trump White House, about the weight of what they wake up with every day because of what the president put out on Twitter. And it reads in part, finally, Mr. Trump hasn't let up because no one can stop him. Within the White House, aides describe a nearly paralytic inability to tell Mr. Trump that he has erred or gone too far on Twitter. And that's all of it. It begins and ends right there.
Yeah, and the team members that I really worry about, Brian, are not so much the aides in the White House, because they kind of signed up for this, if you will, but it's really the cabinet secretaries, the Secretary Mattis, the Secretary Tillerson, the Secretary Kelly, straight down the line. People, men of honor who've stepped forward after decorated careers in military and business worlds, and their credibility is on the line, and they get pushed by counterparts overseas and say, hey, why is your president, for example, saying this about the British intelligence service? Why is your president embarrassing our ally Angela Merkel? And it makes it very hard for them to toe the line, and those are the guys who I really feel for.
Go ahead, Pierre.
Well, if I could say one more thing that I think got enough attention coming out of the hearing yesterday from the FBI director was that he said that the Russians infiltrated not only the DNC but the RNC, something that the president himself denied just a couple of months ago, and also that the Russians are committed to infiltrating the 2018 elections as well as the 2020 elections. This administration, if nothing else, should be focused on preventing that from happening.
And this is a man who has access to the best intelligence and information in the world, and yet he's relying on what, Breitbart and Judge Napolitano? What does that say about the commander-in-chief, just in terms of what he is prepared to believe, what he's prepared to disseminate, how many relationships he's prepared to damage? Because every week we go, okay, what are the possible consequences? Well, is there any ally that we have not insulted? Yes, he has not said one negative thing about Vladimir Putin, but is there any ally that he has not actually gone out of his way to insult at this point?
Well, in fairness, the Australians had it coming too.
Well, yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, put on your national security hat. Just for this one item, we need your expertise, and that is Homeland Security, out of nowhere, put some restrictions on incoming flights today, specifically, basically anything larger than a phone, laptops, tablets, cameras, restricted on flights coming to the U.S. from 10 different overseas airports from 8 mostly Muslim countries. Out of nowhere, it affects 50 flights a day. They've been given 96 hours to implement this. There's a report the Brits are considering following suit. What's behind this, and what should we worry about?
Well, I gotta believe, Brian, that based on the specificity of the devices that were identified, the cities from which flights could originate, and the specific airlines, to me that means that our intelligence services have picked up some very specific and, in their view, credible intelligence about this threat. Obviously an explosive threat that could be implanted in these devices. And so this is worrisome. The fact that our British allies are going along with it just reinforces that conclusion.
And there is other news tonight. We're cramming it all in. The South Koreans report